for those that are lost, if you don't start caring about those that are falling by the wayside, well, then I'm going to show up, and I myself will search for the sheep. I'll go find the sheep. I'll go search for them and heal them and strengthen them. I will come for my sheep. And Jesus is saying, you want to accuse me of fellowshipping with the sinners and publicans? Well, guess what? I'm here to be the good shepherd because you're a bunch of bad shepherds. And the Pharisees, and the publicans and the sinners are listening to Jesus tell this story, and they're like, oh, what a wonderful story. And the Pharisees and scribes outside are getting awfully uncomfortable. He's talking about us. But he's not done. Round 2, he starts talking about this woman. He says in verse 8, either what woman, having 10 pieces of silver, if she lose one piece, does not light a candle, and sweep the house and seek diligently till she find it. And when she hath found it, she calleth her friends and her neighbors together, saying, rejoice with me, for I have found the piece which I had lost. Likewise I say unto you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner that repenteth. Okay, so Jesus uses the first story, and he speaks into their text. He's going to use the second story to speak into their culture. So he asks both of these stories in the form of a question. He talks about what manner of man, if he had lost a sheep, would he not go out and find that sheep? Obvious answer, yes. The second story starts with a woman who's lost a coin. Right? So essentially his story is, which of you, being a woman, getting out of your car late at night, does your purse drop and a few cents fall out? Would you not go into the house, rip the seat out of the car, shine a light, and try to find those 4 quarters? You're like, no, none of us would go do that. It's just 75 cents. What are you talking about? Right? Nobody would go do that. Nobody would care that deeply about a couple of coins, right? So either those coins are extremely valuable or they mean something different entirely, okay? Now, I've always kind of wrestled with this fact, that once she finds the coin, she has a party in which she would have spent the coin to nourish. So she spent all day finding the coin in order to just get rid of it. Right? No. This coin is not merely money. This coin is most likely part of a headdress that a married woman would wear in their culture. These 10 coins fastened on a chain would have been given as part of the dowry from the patriarch himself to his new daughter-in-law as a symbol that you are now part of a new family. Now, Warren Wiersbe goes on to say that this little coin that she was given, it could not have been taken from her under no circumstance. In fact, if she ever was in a debt that would require her home to be taken, her possessions to be taken, the one thing that they could not take is that headdress. They could take her of all of her clothes and all of her possessions, but they could not strip her of that headdress. Why? Because it made her who she was. It was part of her identity. Now, Warren Wiersbe goes on to say that if she was to lose one of these coins, it was grounds for divorce. Now, that's a little steep. And that's why I don't like to say this is their symbol of a wedding ring, okay? Because I'm not wearing my wedding ring tonight. I've got this little rubber one. The one my wife gave me is in the bottom of a lake in Wisconsin. Yeah. I'm a little embarrassed to tell you about that. We were wakeboarding, and we were having a good time, and my hands were getting a little calloused. I got danky hands, and so I was getting a little calloused, and so I tried to take my ring off, and it came off, and it's still there. It's bye-bye. I said, Lexa, I just lost my ring. And my wife said, here's the papers. It's all over. Divorce, right? No. That's not how it works in our culture, right? Now, if my wife would have lost her ring, different story, right? Different story. I paid money for that ring. No, I'm just kidding, right? We don't do that. That's not part of our culture, but in this culture it was. And one of the reasons is because under no circumstance was this woman to ever take the headdress off unless she was in the presence of her husband. And so if the husband came home and she's missing part of her headdress, well, he would have thought that she had taken it off without him present. Perhaps he would have even assumed, perhaps wrongfully, that she had been unfaithful. And so it was grounds for divorce. And sadly, oftentimes there's even record of them killing a woman when they did not have a piece of their headdress, only later to find the piece after she had been killed. I imagine that man lived with a lot of guilt for the rest of his life. But what I'm trying to get you to understand here is that with that context in mind, of course she's going to sweep the whole house and find this coin. Of course she's going to stay up and sweep broken floors and light candles and tear the whole house apart looking for this coin. She's got to find this coin, does she not? Her reputation is at stake. Her marriage is on the line. Her life is on the line. Her honor is on the line. She's got to find this coin. Of course she's going to look for it. And Jesus is looking at those Pharisees and scribes, and he's saying, you have abandoned. You didn't lose. You straight took off and threw away part of what made you mine. Part of who you are as the Israelites. You have taken it, you have lost it, and you don't light the path trying to find it. You don't help them come in. You're not sweeping the floor trying to bring those that have been lost back in. No, you've abandoned it. You have abandoned what made you part of the bride of Christ. Oh man. He's preaching a pretty pointed message to the Pharisees and scribes, isn't he? And he's not done yet. Round 3. He says, a certain man had 2 sons. A certain man had 2 sons. This third parable kind of takes, or this third story of the parable kind of takes the cake, doesn't it? Charles Dickens called this the greatest short story ever told. I think he's right. I think he's missing the first 2 parts of it, but I think he's right. This story's awesome. The story, as many commentators have called it, the story of the prodigal son. Perhaps betterly entitled, that's not betterly, but perhaps better title would be the parable of the prodigal sons. Or as I like to call it, the parable of the forgiving father. He says, a certain man had 2 sons in verse 11. And the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided unto them his living. Now, I want to get through the story, okay, because the story's awesome. But before we do, I mentioned that the first story dealt with their text. The second story dealt with their culture. This third story is going to use both those elements together. He's going to use elements from their culture and from their text. He's going to weave them into one story that's going to melt the Pharisee in his spot. He's going to have no rebuttal, no answer, nothing he can do about the story that Jesus is telling now. And so we know the story, and this story is beautiful. There's been books written about the story. There's been sermons, thousands of them preached on this story, and it is a good story. In fact, it's a great story. But anytime you read through Scripture, I want to encourage you, you've got to be willing to step out of your culture and step into their culture. Because this is a much different time period than ours. It's a much different culture than ours. And I'm telling you, if you don't do it, you're going to have a good story. It's a good story. It's going to apply, and you're going to find all sorts of application for it in your life. But I found that when you take the time to truly find out what Jesus is talking about and what his audience would have understood him talk about, well, it doesn't just become a good story, it becomes a life-changing story. And that's what I'm after tonight. So stick with me, okay? Because in this culture, this is a patriarchal system, okay? Meaning that the dude is in charge, okay? The patriarch, he's the man. Everybody answers to the patriarch, okay? And the patriarch wasn't just his immediate family. It was oftentimes his extended family as well. They would answer to this patriarch, this father figure in the household. And they all lived together on a family compound type unit known as a batav. And oftentimes they would have other patriarchs that they would fellowship with there together in this batav-like community. And when a man, when one of his sons would go get a wife, he would build on to the batav. He would come and they would come together and live in the family batav as well. And when the patriarch passed away, everything he had, his possessions, his wealth, his honor, his responsibility, his businesses, all of it would have been divided amongst his children, okay? So in this story, we've got a certain man, a patriarch, and he's got 2 sons. So when this man passes, he's going to divide his living into 3 parts. You say, no, he's going to divide his living into 2 parts. Incorrect. He's going to divide his living into 3 parts. Because the elder son, known as the Behor, would get a double portion of blessing. Not just a double portion of the funds, not just a double portion of the money, but a double portion of the responsibility, a double portion of the work, a double portion of the honor. He's now going to take the place. He's going to try his best to fill the shoes of that patriarch. Okay, so when we have the younger of the 2 sons, not the Behor, the younger of the 2 sons coming to his father while he is still living and asking, Lord, Father, give me the portion of goods, not the inheritance. He says, give me the portion of goods. Just give me the good stuff. You just give me the money. You just give me the goods that's going to fall to me when you're dead. We've got the ancient Near Eastern way of saying, Dad, I wish you were dead. I don't care about your honor. I don't care about your legacy. I don't care about the life you've tried to build up. Just give me the money that's due me, and I'll be out of your hair. Now, this is great dishonor. It's not only grounds for disownment, it's grounds for death. Yeah. That in Leviticus, when it says that if your son dishonors you, you can stone him, this is the type of stuff they're talking about, right? This is extreme dishonorment. Now, most communities that we understand in Jesus' day, right, in the Second Temple history period, were past the point of killing their kids because they were dishonorable. But they were not past the point of disownment. They would throw them out of the city. They would not receive their inheritance. They would mark their grave as there. They would mark his grave as dead. They would have a funeral for him amongst the whole family, inviting the other Batavs as well to come and mourn for this child who is still living. He's just no longer allowed to be around. In fact, this is the fate that probably befell a lot of the publicans that sit at the table with Jesus, maybe even some of the sinners as well. These are people who have been through this. They have been disowned. They have been abandoned. They have a funeral, a grave marking their spot back at home. These people have been dead. They are killed. Now, you were allowed to leave the Batav, but you didn't ask for anything on your way out. You were allowed to not care about the patriarch, but you didn't get anything in return. That's why it's so strange that Jesus just answers this by saying, and he divided among them his spoils. Like he divided his living among them, right? Now, it also makes sense why Jesus didn't ask this one in the form of a question, right? He says, which of you being a shepherd, would you not go find the lost sheep? Yes. If you were a woman and you lost part of your headdress, would you not go find it? Yes. And if you had a son who wished you dead and asked for his inheritance, wouldn't you just give it to him? No, Jesus. No. No father would do that. No father would give of his inheritance. Oh yeah, but this guy did. This guy divided his living amongst them. And everyone in the audience says, what an idiot. This father doesn't know what he's doing. This father certainly doesn't understand what he's supposed to do. And from that moment on, this kid, well, he becomes like the scorn of the story. And Jesus is going to do everything in his power to get his audience and us to hate this guy. And he does a pretty good job. Like, he does a great job. Look what happens. It says, and not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. Now, if you remember from Sunday, that phrase, a far country, is most likely a reference to the Decapolis. As Jesus teaches this in the Galilee area, we assume, he is pointing across the sea, and he is pointing to the Decapolis, where you could see pagan smokestacks coming from the temples, a place that was forbidden to go to, forbidden to enter in. And Jesus says, yeah, so this kid, he gets his inheritance, he gets his money, and he goes over to the far distant country. And everybody in the audience says, of course that's where this kid went. Of course that's where this kid would end up. Of course, he'd go to the place you're not supposed to go. And of course, he wasted his substance on riotous living, because that's all there is to do in the Decapolis is riotous living. Of course, he's wasting his money on the harlots. Of course, he's wasting his money on all the drinks and all the finest that the Decapolis has to offer. And the Bible says then, when he had spent all, in verse 14, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. Good. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into the fields to feed swine. Now we know, if there's one thing we know about Jewish people, we know what? They don't like pork, man. They're not a fan of the bacon like Eric is, okay? The pig is unclean. It's one of those unclean animals. And so, of course, Jesus paints this kid ending up in a pig pen feeding pigs. What a perfect place for an unclean child to be with the unclean animal, the pigs. Like, perfect ending, Jesus. I mean, what wonderful story. This is. I like that one. That one's good. And then Jesus twists the knife. I love it. He says, and he would fain have filled his belly with the husk that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. Oh, he's in that pig pen. He's watching the pigs eat this trash, eat this slob, this stuff that would be poisonous for a human to eat. He's watching these pigs just gobble it up, and he's sitting there going, that looks really good. Oh, he would have fain have filled his belly. He's begging for food, and no man, not even the pagans, have sympathy for this kid. Woo-hoo, Jesus! That's a good one. But then you know how it goes. He has this come to God moment, right? This come to Jesus moment. This come to himself moment. Where he's like looking at the pigs, wanting to eat their food, and then he goes, wait, what am I doing here, right? The Bible says when he came to himself, he said, how many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare? And I perish with hunger. I will arise and go to my father, and I will say unto him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before thee, and I'm no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. Okay, so like we look at this story and we're like, yeah, great plan. Finally, you're coming to the end of yourself. Now you realize you need to go back to the Father. Yes, that's what you should have realized when you were back home, that you had a good father. You should have stayed home. Yes, this is exactly where we want this kid to be, where he's like, yeah, I know, I blew it. I'm not good enough to be a son, so make me one of your servants. Like, this all sounds perfect for us, but for everybody in that audience, they're sitting there and they're thinking, that ain't how it works. You don't get to come back. Doesn't matter how sorry you are. It doesn't matter how much you wish things were different. No. You don't get to come back and just be a servant. No. You're dead. They had a funeral. It's over. If you do come back, they will kill you. You're not allowed to enter back in. In fact, there are remains of people outside of Batavs with no markings on their grave. And they have found grave markings with no bodies inside of them. And it's exactly what we're describing taking place here in the story. That father's not giving this kid a time of day. In fact, those publicans and sinners are sitting there thinking, yeah, I tried that once. Yeah, I got ran out of town real quick. I've tried to go talk to Dad. He hasn't said a word to me since I left. These kids know that's not how this story works. And that's why this story is beautiful. Because the Bible says in verse 20, and he arose, and he came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him. He saw him, and he had compassion, And he ran, and he fell on his neck, and he kissed him. And the son said unto him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and in thy sight. I'm no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, Bring forth the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his feet, and put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet. And bring hither the fatted calf, and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead, and he is alive again. He was lost, and he is found. And they began to make merry. This kid starts making his way back home, and he's rehearsing the script in his mind the whole way back. I'm not worthy to be your son. I don't really care about being your son, but man, would I like to be a servant. Land, just give me a job. Just give me some work to do so I'm not starving, and I'll take a shower. I'll clean up. Like, he's rehearsing this whole line in his head as he's walking back home. And everyone in the audience is like, I don't care what this kid does. He's not getting a meeting with the father. But the father, when he was yet a great way off, he saw him. Well, what does that tell you? It tells you he was looking for him. This isn't just a story about a dad who lost his son and has no clue where he's at. No. This is a story about a father who loses his son, and he knows exactly where he's at. He knows exactly what kind of lifestyle he's in. He knows exactly what kind of filth is draped all over his body. He knows exactly what his son has been doing. And yet every day he gets up, he sits on that front porch in his rocking chair, and he looks towards the path going to Decapolis. And he's longing and he's waiting for his son to come home. And he's sitting and he won't get up and he won't get up. And one day he sees someone coming and he gets excited. Is this the day my son's come home? No, it's just a weary traveler, someone else who had lost his way. And so he's sitting there and his servants bring him food, but he can't eat. And his wife begs him to come in and get some rest, but he can't sleep and he can't eat. And he's starving himself because he's missing part of his family. He's missing what makes him complete. And as he looks out that day, he sees his son a great way off. And before he even knows why the son is coming home, he gets up, he hikes up his toga, and he runs. That might not seem like a big deal to you, but in this day, patriarchs don't run. And if you want to know why, just watch Pastor run. It's not very pretty, right? No, when you're old and you're dignified, you don't run around. Running around's a child's sport. Not for the dignified, not for the men of honor, not for the patriarch. This guy doesn't care about any of that. He sees his son, and before anybody else can get to him and send him away, before anybody else can pick up the stones and get ready to kill him, he hikes up that skirt, and he starts running, and he gets to his son, and he falls upon his neck, and he kisses him. He doesn't say, go take a shower. He doesn't say, let's get you cleaned up. No, he wraps his arm in love around him. He kisses him. A mark of restoration, a mark of bringing back to the family. And the son starts going through the script. Oh, Dad, I've blown it. I'm not worthy to be your son. And as soon as he says it, he can't even get it out of his mouth. As soon as he says, I'm not worthy to be your son, the father cuts him off. He says, well, that's not right. No. Bring forth the best robe and put it on him. Bring a ring and put it on his hand. Bring forth shoes and put them on his feet. Well, whose robe do you think was the best robe? That was the father's robe. What ring do you think they're talking about? That's the family signet ring. The shoes were reserved for sons, not slaves. These are marks of family. These are marks of restoration. These are marks of him saying it doesn't matter if you're worthy or not. You are my son. It doesn't matter what you've done. You literally are my son. So bring forth the fatted calf. You know how many people can eat off a fatted calf? Around 200 to 300 people. This is a feast they're having. This is a party they're throwing. Everyone's invited. Why? Because this, my son, was dead, and now he's alive. This my son was lost, and now he was found. So they're going, the servants are going around. They're knocking on the doors. Hey, guess what? Little Junior's back. Yeah, guess what? You know that kid we buried a few months ago? Yeah, he's home. He's alive. We're celebrating a resurrection tonight. We've got someone who was dead, alive again. Hey, come eat of the fatted calf. Come on in. We're having a party. And they began to make merry. And don't you just love it? It fits in with the rest of the stories. Something was lost. It was found, and there's a party. Something gets lost, it's found, and there's a party. The son was lost, he's found, and there's a party. And you know how the story ends. And they all lived happily ever after. Wrong. Jesus says, now. That's his way of saying meanwhile. Right? Like, there's more. Now what? What could possibly get better than that? Now what? Now the elder son, oh yeah, that's right. The certain man had 2 sons. The elder son, we should figure out what he's doing. The elder son was in the field. And he came and drew nigh to the house, and he heard music and dancing. And he called one of his servants and asked what these things meant, because they were Baptists and didn't believe in music and dancing. And he said, that was a joke. I added that. Forgive me, God. And he said unto them, thy brother is come, and thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he hath received him safe and sound. And he was angry, and he would not go in. Therefore came out his father and entreated him. Oh man, I want to go on, but we gotta look at this word, because this word entreated, it's the Greek word paraclete. It's translated as 17 different English words in your Bible. You're going to see it translated as the word beseech, edify, encourage, comfort, beg. You're going to see it as it's one of the most versatile Greek words that there is. And so translators don't even know what to do. They're confused. And in fact, when Jesus talks about the Holy Spirit, he refers to him as the parakletos, as the comforter. Right? And so this is a word that's got some spiritual aspects as well, some divine aspects as well. But if you really parse the word out and break it down, it literally means to come alongside of. This idea of wrapping your arm around somebody to lift up, to edify, to beg, to challenge, to encourage. And the father is coming out the back door. He's willing to leave the party, to go out the back door, to put his arm around the elder son, because he's absent and angry and he would not go in. And the father's saying, hey, what's going on here? He's begging him, he's beseeching him, he's encouraging him, he's edifying him, he's trying to comfort him, he's trying to get him to realize the mistake he's making. Hey, come on, there's a party, let's go celebrate the resurrection. And the son, the elder son, answering his father, says in the next verse, he answers his entreatment. And he says to his father, lo, these many years do I serve thee. Neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment. Yet thou never gavest me a kid, that I might make merry with my friends. Where a kid, there's a goat, feeds about 40 to 60 people. But as soon as this, watch this, thy son, not my brother, this thy son was come, which hath devoured thy living with harlots, thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. Okay, so note, just as willing as the father was willing to run out the front door and wrap his arms around the younger brother, he's just as willing to run out the back door and wrap his arms around the elder brother. Hey, listen, both of these kids are lost. Both of these kids are dead. Neither one of these kids knows what it means to be part of the family, to be a son. The one is clearly lost in his unrighteousness, while the other one is lost in his self-righteousness. But they are both lost. They are both absent from the party. And the father is willing to run after the unrighteous, and he's willing to run after the self-righteous, and he's willing to encourage, he's willing to pick up, he's willing to usher them back in. But here's the difference. The unrighteous come into the party. The self-righteous don't want to be a part of it. And this son, he says, you want me to go into that party? No way. Absolutely not. I've been sweating out here all day, all month, all year, and the last year, and the year before that too. And we took a break because of COVID, but I've been working before that too. And we were working and working and working, and I've been sweating, and I've been working my butt off. And you've never once let me have a party. You've never once celebrated my hard work. You've never once allowed me to take a goat and have a little party with my 40 friends where we can get together and just play some Nintendo Switch and hang out with the boys. You've never given us a break. No, we work and we slave, and I've never once broken any of your rules. I've been home at the right time. I've gone out at the right time. I've never been late to work. I've kept all the commandments. I've worked and I've worked and I've worked. But as soon as this little son of yours comes home and he's been wasting his life and he's been wasting your money, he's been dishonoring your name, he's been tearing down our family reputation with the harlots and with the wine. Oh man, as soon as he comes back, you're like, oh, let's go have a fatted calf. Let's have a big old party for little brother boy who's here. No, I'm not going in. I'm done with this family. And the father looks at that son, and in my opinion says two verses that are perhaps the most convicting verses I've ever read. He said unto him, son. He calls him son. He says, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. He looks at this son and he says, son, you're my son. Like, I don't know if you get how this works. All that I've got is yours. He took his share. The rest of it's yours, man. If you wanted a goat to kill and eat with your friends and make merry, yeah, you could have done that. It's your goat. What's mine is yours. That's how a family works. I'm sorry you felt like you had to earn it, because you don't. And I'm sorry you felt like he didn't earn it or that he lost it, because he didn't. You don't get disowned. You're my son. You are who you are because that's who you are. Not because you earned it. Not because you somehow measured up. No. That's not what makes you worthy. You're not worthy because you're worthy. You're a son because you're a son. He says, if you want to party with your friends, you can go have that party. But then he says this, it was meet, it was necessary, it was vitally important that we should make merry and be glad. For this, I love it, this, thy brother was dead, and he is alive again, and was lost, and is found. He calls him back, and he says, no, he's not just my son. He's your brother. And we are a family that celebrates resurrections. We're a family that when dead people raise from the dead, we party, we celebrate, we make a big deal. We want everybody to know that we're a family that celebrates resurrection. We're a family that celebrates restoration. We're a family that receives, not rejects. We're a family that celebrates, not condemns. It was necessary that we have a party. It was necessary that we make merry. Why? Because this, thy brother was dead and he's alive. And so we party. Okay, Jesus, few pointers, all right? Few pointers. I know, you're not really interested in what I have to say about your preaching, but just if you're planning on telling this sermon again, Jesus, maybe leave off the elder brother part, all right? It's a little bit awkward, a little bit of an unusual ending there. Maybe end with the big party and they're all making merry. That's a much better ending, all right? Jesus, like why would you tell us that? Why put a downer on the whole story? Why would he tell them the part about the elder brother? Can I tell you he had to tell them the part about the elder brother? Why? Because they're all sitting there wondering, Where's the elder brother? You know why? Because it's in their text. It's in their text. They've heard this story before. It was part of their history class. When they learned about the patriarchs, they learned about a certain man that had 2 sons. And the younger of the sons, Jacob, well, he went and he got a blessing from his dad. Oh, he got a blessing he didn't deserve. Long before he was supposed to get it, he got a blessing. And he went off and he spoiled it. He wasted it on riotous living. He got himself in some big trouble with his father-in-law. In fact, the father-in-law even pulled one over on him and made him work double time to get the girl he really liked. But man, Jacob made a mess of his inheritance. In fact, he got kicked out of town. You can't come back. He's stuck in no man's land. And he has this encounter with God where he wrestles with him, where he gets alone and he gets authentic and he gets altered. And man, he starts to adore his God and he makes his way back home. We left off last night at the end of chapter 32, but you want to know what happens in chapter 33 of the book of Genesis? Jacob comes back home. And guess who goes out to meet him? Esau. Can I just read a portion of Genesis chapter 33? I know our time's running short, but I'm going to do it anyways. You don't have to turn there. In fact, you can look at verse number 30 of chapter 15. But in Genesis chapter 33, verse number 1, it says, Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau came. And with him 400 men, and he divided the children unto Leah and unto Rachel and unto her 2